Oh, yes. Oh, my God. Okay. So let me just quickly, well, the first bill is Senator Hester's bill, so why don't you come up? We also have 872 and 873 that's going to be heard, and then 227, 229, and 356, which are Senator Bidel, 579, Senator Hayes, 694, Senator Jennings, 748, Folden, and the last bill of the afternoon will be 866. And we are joined by three of our friends from the HGO committee, Bandari, Woods, and Morgan. So Matt Morgan. Oh, it's just okay. It's just so we have a oversupply of Morgans in the room. So that's okay. So Senator Hester. That's right. Right. Okay. Okay. Senator Hester, welcome to the committee. You have 4 minutes. Please begin when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair Barve. Members of the committee, it's my first time in ENT this year. Good to see you, especially my delegate, Natalie Ziegler. Thank you for your consideration of Senate Bill 830, which, as amended, will commission 2 studies to improve the efficiency and consistency by which our local health departments and environmental staff operate. This is an area that I'm passionate about, and I've been working on it for a couple years. So even though it's a study bill, it really addresses some of the challenges our local departments are struggling with. As some of you who are on a well or septic system know, the septic systems are costly and time-consuming parts of the construction process. And since 2021, I've worked with the Department of the Environment, the Department of Health, and the industry and other key stakeholders to improve the septic permitting process. And I know Vice Chair Stein has also worked on this. I brought a couple of reports with me, but we worked in this interim of 2021 with MDE and engaged the state through 6 listening sessions on the septic system permitting process. These included industry practitioners, government employees, and stakeholders from the building industry, and interestingly enough, the agritourism industry. And I have copies of these reports, which I'll share with you. Can vary from anywhere from like 1 month to 18 months. And it's often without adequate and consistent communication between the local health department and the permit applicants. There's also confusion between the regulatory authorities of MDH and MDE. And colleagues, I was actually sitting on a Zoom call with, it was then Deputy Secretary Tablada and Deputy Secretary Chen, and they were saying, no, that's your job. Because the delegation of the authority from MDE to MDH is really kind of confusing at the local level. And then the other part of this is that the state, as in many of our agencies, hasn't adequately supported our local environmental health specialists in terms of hiring their staff, paying competitive salaries, and upgrading the necessary IT systems. It would be so much faster if we, at the local level, could look at a septic permit and have MDE at the state level look at it at the same time. That would save an enormous amount of time for our constituents. So anyways, the solution to this industry is complicated. And last year we passed the Chair Stein's bill to increase the licensing requirements for the private septic system inspectors. However, there's still this gap that we've identified on the public sector side. And so Senate Bill 830 simply requires the department to conduct 2 studies, one on the staffing needs, including wage competitiveness and educational requirements, and the other to review this delegation of authority, which happened 25, 30 years ago, from MDE to MDH for the environmental health permitting process. So as our state continues to consider solutions for rebuilding our state government and improving the quality and efficiency of public service, especially as we consider affordable housing, our environmental health bureaus are key partners in this, and for these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 830. And I'd be happy to take questions.
Any questions from the committee? Simply means you've done an excellent job. Thank you very much.
Okay, could I leave a copy of the study with somebody?
Pardon?
I have a copy of the study if anybody wants to look at it.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Next, since we have Senator JB here, good seeing you, sir.
Good seeing you too, Mr. Chairman.
It's
hard
good.
to believe you and I, over 20 years ago, christened this room with
right
the
here.
new committee.
Right here.
It's good to be back.
Yes, sir.
As a former alumnus of this committee. For the record, Senator J.B. Jennings here on Senate Bill 694. Pretty simple bill. It deals with land transfer with Department of Natural Resources. Sometimes DNR might have a piece of property that they need to trade with a private landowner, or vice versa. The private landowner may say, hey, you know what? This might be an easier form of egress to our property if we have this. It's been a long process to do that. What this does is kind of simplifies it, and there's three things to note about it. Number one, property can't be more than 5 acres, so it has to be a very small piece of property. Number two, if the landowner or a private landowner is the one who initiates this and decides, hey, I want to try this, and DNR agrees to it, the private landowner shall pay all costs, surveys, engineering, recordation taxes, anything like that is on the private landowner. And third, in the end, if DNR decides to go forward with this and they do this, the final disposition sits with the Board of Public Works. They're the ones that have the ultimate say on whether or not this can take place. Again, it's a very simple bill. It's just dealing with property under 5 acres. DNR is here. They've supported it. We've worked several years on trying to get this fine-tuned. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take questions, or I can turn it over to the department.
Thank you so much. Identify yourself, and you have 2 minutes. Thanks for being here.
Sure. My name is Hillary Bell, and I am the Director of the Land Acquisition and Planning Unit at the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. The department owns over 500,000 acres of land throughout the state, and as you can imagine, that comes with significant boundaries to manage. There are instances where small land exchanges with adjacent property owners would be a benefit to the department, and those instances include addressing a small encroachment or boundary line management. And so Senate Bill 694 would just authorize the department to use a more streamlined process while still ensuring that, you know, the department would still go through the internal review process to ensure that any exchange is consistent with the department's goals and objectives and is a benefit to the department and the state. And it would still go to the Board of Public Works for final approval, as the senator mentioned. And so for those reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the committee? Delegate Lehman? Oh, well, let me see what I can do here.
And again?
There you go. Go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you so much for bringing the bill. I do have a question or two for the department. Is this just about areas that are adjacent to or contiguous with the property of the state that the state already owns?
Oh, wait a minute. I think I must have done something here. I apologize.
Yes, I believe the only time the department would utilize this provision of statute would be when it's, you know, where two adjacent properties, the department owns one, a private landowner owns another, and it would be like a small portion.
Is that language in the bill that restricts it to that?
I don't believe it's specific to that.
I'll tell you the reason. A few years ago, there was a proposal to swap some state park land for some land on the Potomac River. So between Frederick and the Potomac River, they're clearly not adjacent to each other, okay? That raised a lot of concerns at that time. So I want to make sure that this bill doesn't open the door to that kind of large-scale land swap again.
No, so this again would only apply to those small properties under 5 acres, and it would be, you know, the department would review this and really only use this provision of statute. It's just authorizing us to use it for these smaller things. It wouldn't apply to a large, anything over 5 acres.
Even so, a small, the relative value of the places, if they're that far apart in different parts of the state, and the impact on the local community might be very different if it's right adjacent to the property.
Right.
Senator, would you mind an amendment
Well, I was
to
getting ready to say,
clarify
I know
that?
exactly the issue you're talking about, and that's not what this is for. This is strictly, you know, the state park's right here, and a homeowner's right next to it, and again, let's just say
Yeah.
the boundary line made some strange
Yeah, I don't have any
line.
problem with,
So, I don't have a I support if you want to add an amendment to say, and I don't
That's
know what
all
the
it is.
terminology is, contiguous or
Adjacent to.
adjacent, if that's the right legal jargon to use.
Okay,
Where,
well-
and that's the idea, is strictly it's property touching each other.
Perfect, thank you.
We're going to go right on around. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have the same concern as Delegate Healy. I first looked at the agency's statement and saw no mention of contiguousness, and I don't see it in the bill. And I do think that's really important for a variety of reasons. The other thing I wanted to ask the agency about is, because I don't see any mention of it, would there be any public notice or hearing requirements prior to this transaction?
It would go to the Board of Public Works for approval, which is public, but no, there wouldn't be any additional,
But adjacent landowners would not have to be notified?
not as the bill's
Okay.
drafted.
And are they under other circumstances, or, because I just think public notice is
Yeah,
really important.
The clearinghouse review process, which is part of the existing process, in certain circumstances does require public notice.
So do you see any reason why it should not be used in these instances as well?
The intent was to just streamline the process, and, you still do have the public notice at the
And
Board of
I
Public
understand
Works.
that, but in streamlining the process, then you leave out impacted people. So I'm concerned about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, what problem are we solving?
So, just sometimes there's a lot of red tape trying to get this process done, and it takes years. And again, it's a one-for-one swap when we do this. And we're just trying to simplify the process that many of our constituents have had to face when they've tried to deal with this process, that it has taken years to work through it. And it's just trying to simplify it for small parcels. Again, you got to realize sometimes it's a driveway, sometimes it is, there's just, it is, she mentioned they own millions of acres. And there's been times over the years where something has been built on state land, somebody might not know it. That property has been sold several times, and it's not until, a survey's done that they realize, hey, wait a minute, this garage was built 200 feet on state land. Well, it's going to take years working through the process, whereas the state can say, hey, you know what, in exchange for that, we'll just say, 10,000 square feet that property sits on, we're going to exchange it for over here and take that back so the state is made whole. And that's the idea we're trying to handle.
Okay, and is that the reason why if the property owner initiates it, they pay for the legal costs?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Because we, again, we've been working on this for a while. And if the state, because there's times where the state will come to the landowner and say, hey, you know what, we really want to buy this piece of property here because, they might not have access, so they want to do a cut through, and in exchange, we'll give you 3 acres over here. That's the state that initiated it. They're the ones that want it. It's going to benefit the state, so let them pay for it. Whereas if it's you, the homeowner, the private landowner, you initiate it, then you pay the costs.
Thank you.
Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you tell me how many properties this affects at the moment?
I know of one, but I do know it has come up before. So as this bill has been drafted and sitting here, we've had people call, as well as I know the state has said, working with the prior administration, there were times where they wanted to do a land swap and they couldn't get it done. It's not a lot, I'm thinking singles.
Yeah,
I'll
I
turn it
would
over.
say in the last few years, we've only done one, and it was less than a quarter acre exchanged for less than a quarter acre. And the reason we had to do that land exchange was like the senator mentioned, a few property owners before had inadvertently built a small, structure that went over the state boundary line, so, but that took a long time to go through the process. It's going to be only a couple a year, in my experience.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Well, seeing none, that concludes the public hearing on Senate Bill 694. Again, good to see you, Senator.
You too, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other senators or their representatives in the, Senator Bidle, okay. Pam, great to see you. Let's start with Senate Bill 229.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're back. I missed you. So it's nice to be back in committee and see some old friends and new friends. So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, you said which of my three bills did you want to start with?
Oh, do you want to, are you doing Anne Arundel County 227 also?
I am.
Why don't you start with that?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair, and who's not here, and members of the committee. For the record, Pam Bidle, Anne Arundel County. Senate Bill 227 is a county bill. It came in at the request of our county council, actually, and like many of you, we're having issues with dirt bikes and ATVs running on county roads, and it's been a real problem for our police department. So some other counties have found ways to enforce the illegal use of these vehicles. So Anne Arundel County is requesting similar legislation, and really this is enabling legislation. It's going to go back to the county for the county council to actually put the regulations in force, but to allow them to impound these vehicles that are used illegally on the roads.
Well, the bill title, pardon me for interrupting, says abandoned vehicles.
Well, they're basically abandoned, they're left on the road,
Okay.
or I guess that maybe the drivers run when the police come, but it is for abandoned vehicles. It has passed the Senate 44-0. Today, it passed the House delegation. You should have your letter with the vote and the amendment that was put on at the request of the county. And I would respectfully request a favorable report on the amended Senate Bill 227 for the Anne Arundel County delegation.
Okay, any questions for the senator on this local bill that has no opposition? Apparently not. Okay, let's move on to Senate Bill 229.
Senate Bill 229 is a really interesting bill. It's noise abatement monitoring system, and there are noise cameras. And so the bill, I first introduced the bill as a statewide bill it was a House cross-file from one of your delegates. It was really her idea, but it's really interesting technology. So, these loud muffler vehicles that go zinging by you when you're maybe you're coming up 97 and they're zing, 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 they're a little scary. Our police officers really don't have the equipment to ticket these vehicles because they would need certain sound equipment. And so what this bill is you would place these sound cameras at certain locations where you're having a problem, and it would actually take a photo of the tag. So the camera would pick up, or it would pick up the sound, and then the camera would take the picture of the tag. It can be very, very useful to, and the sound is illegal. I mean, these mufflers shouldn't be converted like this, so they're all illegally used. When the bill got into the jurisdiction of JPR, they wanted to only make it certain counties. And so the chair of JPR is a Montgomery County resident with a lot of constituent issues on the sound issue. So he asked to make it a pilot in Montgomery County and then Anne Arundel County, since it was my bill. And so we agreed to the pilot program. But for the first year, they've made it, as long as it's a pilot, that it will issue a civil warning. It won't be, it's not a citation on the driver, it's on the vehicle, but it will be a warning. And it will give us time to see how this new technology works and then come back and decide if we want to do more, issue civil citations as we do on speed cameras and red light cameras. So it's a pilot program for the first year.
Hi.
Hi.
Good to see you, Senator.
Good to see you.
I thought that Prince George's was also going to be included as one of the pilots. Is that the case, or is it not?
I did hear Prince George's wanted to be included. Now it says Anne Arundel, Montgomery, and Prince George's. You're absolutely right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for, Delegate Davis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, you mentioned that it is a pilot program for the first year. Are you leaving it open for something else after that?
They will need to come back. I think they'll need to come back and make a decision if we're going to do anything more than a pilot. It doesn't say that we're going to go forward with anything else, so it'll be another bill.
It's just a pilot bill,
Yes.
and it's for 1 year.
For-
Thank you.
See how it works. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Beidle, thank you for your work on these various car bills. You have put in a lot of time and effort. I appreciate it. So similar to Delegate Davis's question, it's 1 year as a pilot with no fines, just
Let me make one
warnings.
correction if I can, Delegate Lehman. Actually, it's ends September 30th, 2025. So by the time they get the speed monitoring cameras, it'll probably be a full year. I'm sorry, I just wanted to make that correction.
So it's 2 years?
It would end September 30th, 2025.
Right, I saw that date, and that's what I was going to ask about. But I also, in reviewing, going down to the end to look at the sunset date, I noticed in the paragraph above, it talks about if a local jurisdiction authorizes a noise abatement monitoring system. So is this at the same time acting as an enabling bill, or what is that a reference to?
They will report to the General Assembly. They'll still have to come back. If another jurisdiction wants to authorize a program, they shall report to the General Assembly.
Okay, but it appears, unless I'm misreading that passage, and this is the second to the last paragraph on page, whatever the last page of the bill is, it says a local jurisdiction that authorizes a program of noise abatement under this act shall report to the General Assembly on the information, like as if it comes across like it's an enabling bill almost. Is it meant to be, or? Because I don't think any jurisdictions can do this without
No, they
state.
can't do this without, that's why we were authorizing Montgomery, Anne Arundel, and Prince George's, because it's coming from the General Assembly, from the state. So they
Right.
would need to come back. They couldn't just do this on their own.
Right, I understand that, but the bill is only allowing for warnings and not actual
Right.
fines, correct?
Correct.
So then could any of these three counties or all of them then transition to a program with fines without an additional bill to give them permission to do that?
Delegate Lehman, I'm not the attorney in this.
Okay.
I think you have a wonderful attorney, Patrick Tracy, who does your
Okay.
motor vehicle law, and I
Okay.
think Patrick could probably very clearly answer
Okay,
that. And
that's
I
fine, that's
apologize,
just
I
how
don't
it
know the
reads,
answer.
and I did not think that's what was going to happen with this bill. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any further questions for Senator Beidle? Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Be
good
nice.
Good afternoon, Senator. What, is there a decimal level? I was kind of scanning this thing really quick. Do you have a level where it goes above a level, a certain sound level?
Delegate Jacobs, I believe that's going to be part of the regulation, it's not in the bill.
But I mean, we've heard a couple bills in here that had specific levels. And then with the machine, the automated machine, in order for it to say, take a picture of a tag, it would have to be at a certain level.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Do you know what that level is?
It has not been set in the bill. I don't know if it's going to be set by the vendor or if it's going to be set by the county, but it's not specific in the bill about what level.
Thank you.
There is a level in state law. I think is it 55 decibels? So that I would think would be the minimum is what the state law recommends. Don't forget what these vehicles are doing is illegal. Modifying these mufflers to make this noise is currently illegal. There just isn't any way to enforce it, and this is an opportunity to enforce it.
Any other questions for Senator Beidle on this bill? Seeing none, thanks. That ends the public hearing on 229. Let's go to 356, Senator. And you also have Dan Woomer, who is signed up favorable with amendments. So you'll testify, he'll testify, then we'll do questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. Senate Bill 356 is a transportation bill for the Citizens Committee for the Enhancement of the Community surrounding the BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport. For the record, again, Pam Beidle, Anne Arundel County. The proud senator that represents BWI Airport, but my citizens aren't so happy. So this is a way, right now, we already charge in legislation $1 for every flight that takes off and $1 for every flight that lands. It amounts to less than $400,000 a year to the county, and right now the money's used for transportation issues like sidewalks and speed humps and community signs. It's all about transportation issues. The bill, number one, increases the fee to $2 per flight, not per passenger. I had the president of Southwest say to me, "Is that per passenger?" I wish it was. It's $2 per flight. The airlines don't even notice it. It's of great deal of effect in the community. So we're increasing the fee, and that isn't a problem. The MAA is not concerned about the fee, but they're questioning whether or not it can be used for anything outside of transportation. So to be completely honest, we have requested an Attorney General opinion if this money can be used for other than transportation projects. If it's only transportation, like the rest of you, I have lots of sidewalks that need to be replaced and built. I have, lots of speed humps that communities would like. That's not my decision. There's a committee of citizens that manage this money, and it's a representation of certain districts in Anne Arundel County and Howard County where we have the noise impact. And with the new second gen, I don't know if you all have heard, we're just having tremendous noise issues, and it's gotten really bad. So this gives them a little benefit from the noise and traffic and pollution and all the things that the wonderful airport, which is the economic driver for the state, brings to us. So it brings good and bad, and we're just trying to help our citizens that are impacted by the airport. So I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 356. It passed the Senate 45-0.
Okay, questions? Any questions for Senator, here we go, Delegate Silberti.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. These folks who are complaining, and I understand why, did they build those homes while the airport was being built, or after it was built, or before?
Delegate, thank you for the question. With the second gen, the noise changed tremendously, and it's people that have lived in their homes for years, people that live near the Severn River, in Annapolis, in Howard County, existing homes. These are not people that came lately and built their homes later.
Okay. So the airport came later.
It was a change of the flight patterns that has caused the problem. Yes, sir.
I forgot to call up Dan Woomer. Dan, are you out there?
Yes,
come on up
he is.
and testify, and then we'll continue questions.
And Mr. Woomer is my appointment that serves on the MAA Metroplex Committee, so he knows a little bit about the airplane issues. But thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, welcome back to the committee. Yes. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. I'm Daniel Lee Woomer, past VP of the Linthicum Shipley Improvement Association, board member and past president of the Maryland Coalition for Responsible Transit, and a voting member of the BWI Roundtable, and pleased to speak before you all again. I encourage the committee members to vote in favor with amendments to change as proposed in Senate Bill 356. As Senator Bidle has stated, currently there's a $1 takeoff and landing fee that's associated with aircraft movement. That's put into a fund that, from that fund, grants are provided to the local communities, the neighboring communities, for transportation-related projects. One of the things that I'd propose I have is that it should have no impact on the state budget whatsoever. The grants are funded by the takeoff and landing fees. On average, there are 8 to 10 grants per year pre-COVID. Even doubling the fees, the number of grants awarded will likely remain small. Existing state resources should be able to absorb these few simple additional grants, given that the majority of the work for the grant is actually completed by the grant requester. So my first suggested amendment is that no additional employee as proposed in the financial and policy note. Second amendment I suggest is to strike line 16 on page 3, quote, improve education, end quote. The grant should be focused on community projects that improve all resident safety and quality of life. For example, the replacement of dilapidated decades-old sidewalks improves the safety and quality of life for tots, parents with strollers, school children, and senior citizens. We've got a lot of different ways that education are funded. I really think that this small amount of money should be kept for community improvement projects. So I encourage the committee members to vote in favor with amendment, and thank you very much.
Senator, how do you feel about those amendments?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. You know, I have Maryland Live in my district, and Maryland Live gives my county about $18 million a year, and that money is used for all kinds of community enhancement projects, but it ends at the 3-mile radius. And so now I have these folks that live just a little out of the 3-mile radius that look at all these extra benefits that people are getting, and sometimes we're purchasing steel drums for a school band, or certain additional enhancements for education that the county can't afford to purchase. And so I'm just trying to use this money in an equal way for the communities that are impacted by the airport. If it's the will of this committee to strike out education, I'm fine with that if that's what you all decide. But until we get the AG opinion, it may not even be our choice. It may be that it just can be transportation funded kind of enhancement. So it's in the jurisdiction of the committee, and I respect that.
Never mind. Okay, I have another question about, you've made some reference to second gen. I've never heard, I'm a technology geek, so I'm surprised I've never heard this. What were you referring to?
So what happened when the Federal Aviation Association was looking at safety issues and plane issues, they rerouted the planes, and instead of being like spread out over a certain area, they're now just narrowed down to where it's like going over the same area over and over and over. So the noise has really increased. There's an area in Howard County, and I don't represent Howard County, but there's an area in Howard County you can't even stand to be outside. Does anybody hear from Howard County? Does anybody in your committee? So do you hear about that? The noise is just relentless and continuous. Every 30 seconds, another plane comes over. We're experiencing that over the Seven River and Annapolis, and it's all been since second gen. And so FAA is now revisiting it, but it's probably going to be another 2 years before they finish their environmental study, so people are going to continue to be impacted by this kind of noise.
Delegate Allen has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill. As you know, I grew up in that area. My family's still your constituents, so isn't it so as well, in addition to the second generation changes, but isn't it so that the air traffic at BWI has just grown pretty much every year since as far back as I can remember?
Yeah.
The air traffic and the expansion, and it's just the volume of everything has continued.
Delegate, thank you for that observation, and that's true too. And I personally believe that after the quiet time of COVID, now that the planes have come back, it's even more significant for
you
folks.
can notice
They're
it,
noticing
yeah.
it more, but it's
Thank
nice
you.
to see you here.
Good to see you.
There don't appear to be any more questions. Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
That concludes the public hearing on Senate Bill 356. I see Senator Zucker somewhere. I see your smiling face out there. So why don't you come up and testify for Senate Bill 866? And I understand the folks from Appropriations are right now filing in here, so it's great to see you. We have waiting for Metzger, but go ahead, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Do you mind if
all
I
right.
have some of my friends who are witnesses
Sure,
come up?
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very
Absolutely,
much.
yes.
Well, for the record, Senator Craig Zucker here, on behalf of Senate Bill 866. Mr. Chairman, I actually wanted to, one, say hello, and two, to apologize, because this is the first time in my legislative career that I've ever come in front of you.
Oh, my, okay.
So,
wow. No,
you know-
don't apologize.
I'm sorry it took so long. you know?
Oh, well, don't apologize.
But no, I tease. But we have, so there are two, and I want to thank Delegate Boyce for her leadership on this bill, as well as we have a Maryland Heroes license plate bill that's sort of a companion bill that will create a likeness of Thurgood Marshall and, Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman on the license plate. But what we've seen is, with the economy being the way it is, the need to make sure that two treasures in our state, the Chesapeake Bay Trust and then MAIF, have an opportunity to really succeed into the future. And what this bill does is this provides an ongoing funding source for both of these beloved treasures in the state, that if there's a decline in license plate revenue for any reason, that it's made whole through general funds. And I know that in the past I've heard some concerns that, well, how do we guarantee if we pass legislation, even if it's saying that something's going to be funded, how do we guarantee that? Well, a couple things. One is I talked to the Moore administration today, and they said if this bill passes, they fully intend to implement it and make sure it's funded. Two is, Mr. Chairman and colleague, given what we put on the ballot a few years ago, we now, the General Assembly, that's why the Appropriations Committee is here as well for the funding piece, but we now have budget authority. So if for some reason a future governor doesn't make sure that MAIF and the Chesapeake Bay Trust are whole, we can. So we really, I feel like this is a good opportunity to make sure that whether there's a decline in license plate revenue, regardless of if there's additional license plates, this gives an opportunity for both MAIF and the Chesapeake Bay Trust to have funding in perpetuity, where they do so much great work, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, on grants, that this really gives them the opportunity to hone in on that. So with that, I just yield the rest of my time to the panel. Appreciate
Okay,
your time.
well, let's, who would like to go next? Please identify yourself and proceed. And you'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barbe and members of the committee. I am Suzanne Richards. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Agricultural Education Foundation. As you know, since 2000, Maryland has had 2 colorful commemorative license plates when the Ag Tag joined the existing Bay Plate. These plates provide revenue to support the important work of the Maryland Agricultural Education Foundation and the Chesapeake Bay Trust. Revenues have remained stable for these organizations because only 2 commemorative plates have been available in Maryland. In other states, when additional plates have been added, revenues for each plate have declined. Senate Bill 866, with the amendments approved in the Senate, would benchmark a minimum revenue level giving general fund appropriations. It's important to note that if there is no loss in revenue, no appropriations would be required. In addition to the Ag Tag license plate revenues, MAIF is supported by private gifts, grants, and program fees. Still, the Ag Tag revenues make up about half of MAIF's budget, which consistently funds our payroll. MAIF performs roles and responsibilities which had traditionally been part of the State Department of Education's Office of Agriculture Education, including professional development for agriculture teachers, management of the Maryland FFA, and day-to-day duties within the Environment, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Cluster. Upcoming changes to Maryland's educational system as a result of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future will greatly impact agricultural education. This pathway provides an important pipeline for individuals to prepare for careers in Maryland's largest commercial industry, which is responsible for 350,000 jobs and more than $8.25 billion with a B dollars to Maryland's economy annually, generating more than $755 million in state and local taxes. In closing, we urge you to find Senate Bill 866 favorable. Thank you.
Okay, Jana.
Great, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's an honor to be before you today. I'm Jana Davis, president of the Chesapeake Bay Trust. Many of you know us really well. We were created by the General Assembly in the 80s as a grant maker to reach communities on the ground and really empower them by giving them the option to apply for their own grants and their own funds, and we used the Bay Plate to support those for many, many years. Initially, when you all created the trust, you did not set up an appropriation, but instead created the Bay Plate and the tax checkoff revenue streams for us. And we always say the money goes through the trust, not to the trust, because we keep just a tiny percentage of that. 90 cents of every dollar goes out the door to programs, which is relatively rare for a nonprofit. In more recent years, you all have created a couple new programs and tapped us to manage them and provided a restricted revenue stream for them, like the Urban Trees Program and the Chesapeake Conservation Corps. You've seen those, I think, possibly recently. We love those programs. They're wonderful. The Bay Plate's different. The revenue's different. We use the Bay Plate money to support K-12 environmental education, community engagement types of work, some of our science programs, some capacity building programs, et cetera. We also use it to leverage money from other sources. So we'll go to EPA, for example, and say we have $300,000 for a Green Streets program. Would you put $1 million in? And in that way, we turn the $3 million of Bay Plate money into about $20 million that goes out the door. Revenues from a license plate program is a little bit unusual, maybe to support a funder, as Senator Zucker and the two of us have talked about over the years. Unfortunately, it's a pie problem. There's only so many vehicles in Maryland, and if there's a ton of license plates, the revenue for any of them will go down. So we really appreciate Senator Zucker's leadership on this issue, and here to answer questions if you have any.
Okay, is Rachel Jones here? I don't see her. So, okay, we'll proceed to questions, and the first one goes to Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Senator, for the bill. I do have a question, because the state has been very disciplined in not expanding the number of plates that can basically cannibalize this money. And this is a way to get around that, but at the same time, I wonder if it might open the floodgates of political pressure to create more and more, and then it becomes not something that's funded by the public by buying the plates, but by the general fund and taxpayers in general. And I'd like, if you have an answer for that, I'd like to hear it, because I really like the idea of this bill.
Sure. Well, I think a couple things. One is that I think it's certainly, so I think for myself and the Senate of Maryland, like it's not our posture right now to create a ton of new license plates. But we believe that given the fact that we have Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman in the State House, and that if you were to go, you know, what I envisioned, and it was brought to us by constituents, but what I envisioned us driving across the country and seeing a Maryland tag and seeing the likes of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, which are world-renowned leaders, and obviously this isn't the bill in front of us, but they're tied together. But it would be good for people to know that even though they're world leaders, that they're Marylanders. And I do not foresee, nor will I support additional license plates beyond honoring those heroes. But I don't know what the future of any of these license plates are going to be in terms of people paying money for them. So the thought was, how do we honor Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman in the way around, and we introduced it around Black History Month, so it was like, these are Maryland icons, and I think they can stand alone in their own right. But how do we honor these Maryland heroes while also honoring our commitment to the Chesapeake Bay Trust and MAIF? And I believe that it was important for them to focus all their attention on making sure they're administering the grants and making sure that no matter how the economy goes up and down, because if the economy goes south, which we're right now probably in the middle of a recession anyway, which the folks from APROPS could tell you, people aren't going to be buying these plates. So this is an opportunity really to make sure that MAIF and the Chesapeake Bay Trust stay whole, all while providing in some way an opportunity, if the Maryland Heroes license plate comes to fruition, that it doesn't cost against MAIF and the Chesapeake Bay Trust. I do think that the folks, I don't think that there's going to be a drastic change in like revenue, but the bottom line is that this will ensure that they're whole if there is.
Did you just say you thought we were in a recession?
Well, I think we're we won't know if we're in a recession until we're out of it. But I think we're definitely the economy's hurting, but we're going to make it through. Maryland, at least for us.
You know that our unemployment is at historical lows right now.
Yeah, I'm just talking about in terms of inflation, but the bottom line is I think we are.
That's going down too.
Yeah, and I think that's part of our work, right? That we've done in the state of Maryland, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The grilling continues. Senator, you know, like was mentioned by my colleague over here, we've always, in this committee, done a good job of protecting the bay tag and the ag tags. And, you know, every year there seems to be somebody want to come in with additional tags. And the legislation introduced this year for Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, I think is a great idea. I was just wondering why the governor never made it the default tag to begin with. You know, it seems like every governor has a default tag. They got the one on there now with the Maryland flag, and I think Fort McHenry or something like that was on during O'Malley's administration. So I'm wondering why that it wasn't a default tag to honor these people. But what I'm reading the fiscal note, and it talks about the Transportation Trust Fund expenditures increase. So is that where the money's going to come from?
I mean, it's our sense that it's going to come out of the general fund. I know that they mentioned the Transportation Trust Fund, but my sense is it's going to be just general funds. And in terms of the posture of, you know, I know that each governor has an opportunity to, in this case, he has the opportunity to create his own tag, but I just know that the Maryland General Assembly leads, so we're just going to do what we need to do, but I can't speak to what the governor plans to do for
So-
his license plate. Yeah.
So just so you're aware, did you see the fiscal note?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you read the fiscal summary?
What's that?
Did you read the fiscal summary?
I did, yes.
And it says transportation fund expenditures increase as early as 2025 to provide mandated funding to the Chesapeake Bay Trust and Maryland Ag Education Foundation.
Two.
Right?
Yeah, two. It's mandated funding to them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the money's coming from the Transportation Trust Fund.
Well, that's what we were trying to, that's what when I saw the fiscal note drafted, they had said that it's coming from the Transportation Trust Fund. I believe it's going to come out of the general fund, but I can
Well, we-
clarify that.
Well, I'd like to have clarification on
Yeah, of
that
course,
if I
yeah, yeah.
could. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator. It's a touchy question, but I'm just going to ask it. At any point since the 80s and since 2000, has there been a study or a plan by either organization about how, if for some reason you have a decline in plate, and we can make up a scenario that we implement a robust transportation system and most people stop driving and they don't have cars, and then they decide to use transportation more, you would then lose funding as well, right? And so the question for me is, has there been any strategic planning in any of your time to see how to start beginning to think about these things a little differently to figure out how you would then make up those funds? Because on one hand, I hear my colleague over here, how we protect the plates, but I hear the more and more I've been involved in this, I think we could have other plates so people can diversify, and somebody may want a rye now with rye is now the state's spirit. They may want that tag or just for it to be celebratory, not necessarily as a fundraising mechanism. And so someone would otherwise say that it may not be unfair that we hold this in such a way where we don't open it up to somewhere else. But so I'm just curious about that. Just a question.
Do you want to go? Sure. So the Chesapeake Bay Trust Board of Trustees talks about this all the time. About 20 years ago, they came up with a sort of drastic transition plan. Heaven forbid the Bay Plate revenue ever did decline for whatever reason. That has changed more recently because we've diversified our revenue. So I would say there's two major things the trust has done over the past 15 years. One is diversified our revenue. So at this point, heaven forbid something drastic did happen to the Bay Plate money, we would still exist, managing other types of money. We have about 40 other revenue streams right now. It still would be a huge hit to our K-12 environmental education and other similar programs. The second major thing that we've done is started an endowment campaign fund. I can talk for a long time about the challenges of putting an endowment campaign together, but the goal is that one day, 100 years from now, the trust will have revenue coming from an endowment that will supplement and sort of allow us to weather any fluctuations in Bay Plate or this type of program. And I would say that Senator Zucker came up with a very good additional idea, which is this, to sort of weather the storm, should there be one.
And I think to Delegate Jacobs' point, because he asked me that during my hearing about the governor's his commemorative plate, it sounded like when I met with you, you said it would be the same issue, I guess, per se, that you saw it when the governor, the past governor introduced the plate and how some folks picked up that plate and then also kind of declined in taking their new ag or bay tag. And so if I remember correctly, to answer Delegate Jacobs' question, it still posed the same issue, correct?
I think for one way to look at it is that it would enable us to honor this particular cause this year without the floodgate issue that Delegate Healy brought up.
But to the point, you would still lose revenue, to your point, because you mentioned that some people may forego their ag or their Chesapeake Bay tag in order to have a commemorative tag.
Without this bill.
Okay, just clarifying. Thanks so much.
And then, Mr. Chair, if I could just, Delegate Jacobs, do you have a copy of the bill in front of you by chance, sir? Okay. I just wanted to address, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, just the question about the Transportation Trust Fund. Thank you so much. Colleague, if you wouldn't mind looking on page 3. of the bill, and then it should be line 8. So it specifically says that it needs to be the annual operating budget. So I'll work it out, Mr. Chairman. I don't know. I flagged it for the Department of Transportation. I don't know why they thought it was coming out of the Transportation Trust Fund, but certainly the intent, Mr. Chairman, is that
Yeah.
it's coming out of the operating budget of Maryland.
Yeah, no, that was my understanding of the bill. Any further questions for the sponsor or the witnesses? Seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the public hearing on Senate Bill 866. I believe Senator Hayes is here, and then Folden. So we'll take Senate Bill 579 first. And welcome back to the committee, Senator.
Indeed, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for allowing me back here once again. Today's a busy day. I apologize for my tardiness. I have 3 bills in 3 different committees, and then we got off the floor late. But thank you so very much for having me this afternoon. I'm Senator Antonio Hayes, for the record, Baltimore City, District 40. Mr. Chairman, it's an honor to present to you Senate Bill 579. You heard the cross-file of this bill, House Bill 728, which was introduced by my colleague, Delegate Ampry. This bill has been significantly amended in the Senate to address the opposition. We had a great deal of conversation with the Board of Realtors, who was able to lend their expertise as they've dealt with this issue in several states outside of Maryland. Predatory exclusive listening agreements are throughout Maryland. Sorry, should have had some water before I got here. As Marylanders work to recover from the financial hardship of the pandemic, certain real estate brokers are taking advantage of offering relatively small amounts of cash for exclusive listening rights. Often homeowners receive only $400 to $600 in exchange for a 40-year exclusive listing agreement. Not only is this extremely unequal, but there are high costs in order to get out of the agreement. MV Realty, a brokerage involved in this practice, charges a termination fee equal to 3% of the home value secured by a lien on the property. The Baltimore Banner reported in October 2022 that roughly 400 of these agreements have been recorded in the city and county land records across Maryland, and likely more have been signed but not yet recorded. This bill prohibits, with specific exceptions, a service agreement or any part of a service agreement for being effective more than 1 year, purporting to run with the land or bind subsequent bona fide purchasers, purporting to create a lien, encumbrance, or security interest of residential property of a party to the service agreement, or allowing a service provider to assign or transfer the right to provide services under the service agreement to another person without notice or consent of the party to the service agreement. A violation of these prohibitions by a service provider is an unfair, abusive, or deceptive trade practice under the Maryland Consumer Protection Act. Subject to MCPA's civil and criminal provisions, among other provisions, this bill also prohibits the submission of recording of such service agreements and establishes criminal penalties for the violation. This bill prohibitions only apply to service agreements entered into on or after the bill's June 1st, 2023 effective date. We need legislation such as Senate Bill 579 to regulate these highly pervasive agreements that are exploiting homeowners and misleading them into decades-long commitments that cost them a lot in the end. Mr. Chairman and members of the ENT Committee, I urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 579.
Okay, Lisa May is here for information, and if you would like to come up and give us 2 minutes of testimony, we'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa May with Maryland Realtors. The bill, as it was first introduced, we had doubts as to whether it got to these home buyer benefit agreements. With the Senate amendments, we believe that it does. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for the sponsor or Ms. May? Don't see any. Okay, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you again, sir.
Have a great week. And next, our old friend Bill Folden is here. Senator Folden is here to talk to us about Senate Bill 748.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm not sure everybody feels that way, but I'll take it. Mr. Chairman, esteemed colleagues, members of the committee, it's good to be back in ENT.
Yeah.
It's always an honor to come here, and it was an honor when I served here. So, and I think we're all can agree that I'm in a place that no one ever really thought I'd be. And I know most of you are looking at me like, yeah, in the Senate. That's not the case. That Delegate Love and I actually cross-filed a bill together, so I'm really proud of that. Anybody that knows,
The end of the world has occurred.
that's what I'm worried about. Cats are going to be living with dogs. It's
Yeah.
going downhill. Mr. Chairman, SB 748, dealing with vehicle laws, military vehicles, registration and operation, is a really simple bill. This bill allows our veterans and the community surrounding our veterans that support them the opportunity to register a retired military motor vehicle, and under the class MVC, a military vehicle collectors registration under the MVA. There is no fiscal assessment on this. There's no fiscal note with this. It would be a $51 registration fee. And the importance of this is currently in our law and MVA system, they require 17 characters of the VIN. But not all military vehicles that are retired, especially from our countries that we have that are our allies, have 17 characters, but they have a unique identifier. So what this bill allows us to do, it allows MVA to establish a system, because in the 70s, MVA required, or I'm sorry, the US DOT required that all vehicles be registered with 17 characters that are from that point forward. Military vehicles in other countries do not have that same standard. And what we're asking is that these vehicles that meet the federal motor vehicle safety guidelines otherwise and would be allowed to be registered for parades, for these activities involving military swap meets, veterans events, education for children, and the occasional use for any of these types of events. That's what this is about. This is going to be kind of like your historic plates, where it's to and from a special event, not a daily driver. And what we want to do is encourage the discussions and continue the discussions about the service and sacrifice that our veterans of today and those of yesterday have put forward, and allow them to come back in celebration and some type of remembrance as well. So with that, I would ask for a favorable report on SB 748. And as one last thing, you do, if you don't have it yet, there is an amendment, and that was requested by SHA. In the language of the bill, it was written that it would be MV-C, and according to what I'm understanding, that their system does not allow for the dash, so what we were doing is we just made it an MVC. That's the only modification for this bill, and with that, I would urge your favorable report on this very simple bill.
Yeah, we have a number of questions here. But you know, it's funny. Does this happen that often, that somebody gets a Humvee or a tank or something that was used in Iraq, and then?
So what we have is, you know, the tanks are their own registration. We want those to be able to not have any stop signs.
Okay.
No, we don't have anything for tanks. This is only for vehicles that are allowed to have registered otherwise. They have to meet all the other safety guidelines. And if the vehicles right now, if they're over 25 years of age or older, so these old deuce and a half, 5 tons from way back when, they're allowed to be done. You see Mission Barbecue doing it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So what we're trying to do is say, look, the time frame shouldn't be like a standard 25 years, because I think we can all agree that vehicles are safer now and in the last 20 years than they were 25 or 50 years ago. So that's what we're trying to do, is allow that if they're retired and they're allowed to be put back into use in some type of show or parade that invigorates and educates our youth and our community.
Well, we've got a ton of questions
And
here.
there's a lot of questions.
Yeah, Delegate Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe I heard you correctly, but I wanted to make sure that I just followed up. So this is for special events and parades only?
Yes, so like right now we have historic vehicles or those types of vehicles that their registration, once they get that registration through SHA and I believe, or MVA, I'm sorry, I apologize, I misspoke. Anytime we have those registered, they're only allowed to and from events and occasional, like on Sunday usage, but to and from events or special purposes like that.
I understood. I'm not too familiar with how that process works, so if someone is just perhaps out on a ride, is there any way of the officer that may fear of interest stop them or something of that nature to determine if they're heading to or from an event? That may sound like.
I mean, you can ask them that, obviously. I mean, more or less, if people in these communities that are seen driving these regularly would be in violation of this. I mean, they're going to be observed. This is more for the occasional use that, and they're pretty identifiable, so it's not like you're going to not see them on the road. But that's what we're trying to do is keep that messaging going in the support of our troops.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator, for this bill. I like the idea a lot. I just wanted to specify, because I think it says in the bill, this only applies to wheeled vehicles, correct?
Correct. Yeah, no tracked vehicles.
Right, because a tracked vehicle is a very, very different story, especially the wear and tear that goes on the road. Okay. Does the bill prohibit the registration of tracked vehicles, or is it?
Yeah, there's nothing that allows us to register, and I don't know, I don't know if you want April to come up, Mr. Chairman, or not.
She's signed up informationally with written testimony, but if you want to come up and
Answer
questions, if you're willing to do that.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And
And for the record, tell us who you are, so it's in the record.
Hi, everyone. I'm April King with the MVA, not SHA.
I apologize.
Okay. Go ahead. Were you done with your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to specify.
That's fine.
So tracked vehicles are not registered?
Correct.
Correct. That was a joke about the tanks.
Yeah. Delegate Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What type of vehicles are we discussing, and is it outlined in the bill?
Yeah, so it'd be all vehicles. It's in the bill about that it would be vehicles that have, that are wheeled vehicles that meet the guidelines set forth under the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards and registered as such. So it's any vehicle that has tires, that rolls, that it otherwise is a vehicle, but it's a retired military vehicle. You could have, we currently have Humvees on the road, we have deuce and a halves, we have 5-ton vehicles, we have all varying different kinds, but no tracked vehicles, nothing like that, nothing of the sort. It would all be.
And they have to be vehicles, no like artillery pieces that have wheels.
They have to be vehicles that have, they meet every other guideline. They have headlights, taillights, turn signals, they meet every other standard.
They're street legal.
Yes.
Okay.
Wait, I don't quite understand that. Is it outlined in the bill? I could probably put lights on
A
mine.
military vehicle defines a wheeled multi-purpose vehicle, including a trailer, manufactured for the military by use under the direction of the U.S. Armed Forces of another country.
Okay.
So it'll be under a military vehicle. There's in the definitions, I believe, as far as if you go into the registration under MVA for military vehicles, it'll have.
Okay, what problem are we fixing?
Well, the problem we're fixing is we have people that have bought retired military vehicles, and because they're not 25 years old, they're 21 years old, or something like that, they're not able to get the vehicle registered currently because some vehicles that are manufactured in other countries don't have the 17-character number on a VIN. They may only have a 13-character number, but it's still a unique identifier that is not duplicated or replicated in any of our systems. But we need to be able to provide for a method for MVA to be able to register these vehicles appropriately, because they'll get an error message if they don't have 17 characters currently in their system and won't allow them to register the vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you for the bill. My questions are along the same lines about what kind of vehicle are we talking? Are there weight limits? I know we have weight limits for large trucks and that are on the road, wear and tear on the roads. And I guess maybe the MVA would know the answer to that. Does this bill have weight limits the kind that apply to other vehicles in the state?
Well, in the bill, it does say it has to meet the national safety standards. We have a little bit of a disagreement if these vehicles meet those standards or not. Some do, some do not.
And that would be vetted through the inspection process that meet the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, FMVSS.
If there's a disagreement about whether a particular vehicle applies,
Mm-hmm.
is it the judgment of the state motor vehicle
Yeah.
that applies? Or is this something that was going to get us litigation and have people
No.
suing us about?
Those vehicles would go to inspection through MSP, Maryland State Police.
Correct.
And so they would have to pass that inspection before they could be approved for this kind of process?
Correct.
And that includes things like the weight of the vehicle and the distance of the axles and so forth, how it's distributed so that it doesn't destroy the roads.
Delegate, I would have to check that fact to just make sure and confirm that those detail that what is included in that inspection includes weight, distance, such like that, axle
So
information.
these military wheeled vehicles, which rise to the GVWR, the gross vehicle weight rating, equal to or greater than 10,000 pounds, shall be required to meet with those same requirements that heavier trucks are meant to require.
I'm just trying to make sure that they're not getting treated in a
No,
way
they're not
that
going to be
will
treated
allow
differently. They're going to be treated to the same standard.
the same standard as
Mm-hmm.
other vehicles that are already on the roads here in Maryland. That's what I want to know.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Senator. Good to see you.
Hey.
I have a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned this was for veterans. Can anyone buy these vehicles or only veterans?
No, anyone can buy them, and then they can be used for those type of shows.
Okay, and that's my next question. Can these types of vehicles be used in parades right now?
They cannot legally drive in a parade unless they're older than 25 years and meet that historic threshold, and some of them, I don't even believe, are still not eligible to be registered.
Correct.
Okay, and then my last question, there's a part in here that says on occasional pleasure trips. How is occasional and pleasure defined in law? I mean, is that, grandma going out on a Sunday? Is that I want to take a joyride around my neighborhood?
So that's currently the same language that's used under historic tagged vehicles, that they're not meant for daily drivers, but they can certainly be taken out for if you want to run down and get an ice cream in the middle of summer and have your vehicle out there on display for people to chit-chat about while you get your ice cream. So that would be a trip back and forth, but not going around, obviously, shopping throughout the whole town and loading it up.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Delegate Love asked my primary question, which was about the occasional pleasure trips. But my other question is this, so you did reference in your answer the question with respect to like antique or.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll call them antique vehicles.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Are these the same stipulations for those antique vehicles, i.e. not going over 35 miles an hour and all of,
I don't know of anything about an antique vehicle that only allows them, historic vehicles is what I referenced, but antique.
That's what I mean, historic vehicles, I'm sorry.
But historic vehicles can go over 35 miles an hour.
Okay, because I am a little concerned that with the occasional pleasure trips, that we're talking about these vehicles in our neighborhoods because of the speed limit requirements. So I do have that question. Again, you answered Delegate Love's question, but can you talked about going to the store to pick up ice cream. Are there any other occasional pleasure trips that you could sort of talk about that you envisioned here?
Delegate, I would imagine there's an infinite number of ways that you could say running down to the store, running down to get fuel. It's not a daily commuter. It's not one that would be driven all the time. That's not the purpose of this bill. That's not the purpose of what occasional use means. It is the same requirements and guidelines that have been in place for decades for registered historic vehicles. That's the exact language.
Correct. I would just point out that they don't weigh as much as these vehicles, but.
Actually, I would say that some do. There's heavy trucks that absolutely are retired historic vehicles that are registered historic and probably have worse braking systems than these vehicles have that are only 21 years old.
Okay, and if I could, Mr. Chair, one other question. It does reference military vehicles from other countries, and maybe this is for MVA. Would those vehicles, they have different standards for not just, on-road requirements and weight requirements, but also for for emissions. And would these vehicles be required to meet our emission standards that we have here in Maryland?
No historic vehicles are required to meet any emission standards.
Okay, but I'm asking about these vehicles.
This is going to be registered the same.
Same way.
In the same type of language as historic vehicles, so they would not be required to meet emission standards.
Okay.
The other point is that other countries, while their vehicles may come here, they still would be required to meet the federal motor vehicle safety standards that is in statute that we follow for our inspections.
Okay, thank you.
Last question, Delegate Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for a last bite of the apple. Senator, I'm not definitely questioning your intent behind the bill, but I must confess I'm conflicted. So I guess my number one question would be, in different parts, are these vehicles going to be insured as far as insurance?
Any motor vehicle on any roadway that it has the intent to be on the roadway that is registered is required by Maryland to have insurance.
And
It's
again,
not like a house.
I'm new to this particular subject matter, so I just want to make sure I just ask that for the record. And then so it would be very unique for me to be in certain neighborhoods and where I'm from, you know, Prince George's County, and to see military vehicles just driving up and down the street. I'd feel like I'm living in a military zone. So you know, that's just.
Well, I can tell you that that's actually exactly not what this is about. This is about education of people, maybe like even yourself, that would see something and want to go ask questions about it, but it's not meant to be a daily driver that you're going to see a bunch of people riding up and down the streets of Prince George's County with, to just ride through communities. It's not, the Santa Claus riding on the fire truck going through the community. This is about, these are educational opportunities, these are to and from events, to and from parades, and occasional usage.
Correct, but if there are parades, I can't put a limit on how many parades there might be. We're not limiting how many people can drive these vehicles, and so now we're just saying, okay, Group A has a parade today, Group B has a parade tomorrow, Group C has a parade tomorrow. You can't control the various theories of how people may feel and what their motive behind getting it is, relishing in perhaps particular events of the past, and so now we're going to go on a joyride parade in military vehicles, just perhaps enjoying the relishings of yesteryear. I don't want to bring up different events that may have happened in the country, but I certainly don't want to have that as a segue into ill-intended demonstrations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I appreciate that concern, Delegate. And what I'll tell you is, we don't see parades across our state every day of the year.
And with that statement, we conclude the public hearing on Senate Bill 748.
Glad to bring a little bit of dialogue and jocularity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that ends the public hearing for this afternoon. We will have a voting session in. We do? Oh, the bi-county bills. Oh, yeah, right, I'm sorry. So who's presenting these? Okay. Oh, is that what, okay. I was, we've done them out, we were doing these out of order, so I lost track.
Are you guys testifying on both bills?
Yeah, just one.
Which one?
The 872. 872.
I think these both originated in Prince George's, right?
Yes.
Because I don't remember them from our delegation.
I,
Okay, well, which one would you like to present?
I would like to do 873, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go for it.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For the record, my name is Delegate Marvin Holmes, and I am here presenting House Bill 873. As initially proposed, House Bill 873 was written to incorporate both Montgomery County and Prince George's County. This is a bill relevant to the requirements for the commissioners of WSSC. Once the bill went through both prospective delegations, Montgomery County and Prince George's County, the Montgomery County put an amendment on the bill to strike Montgomery County. So now the bill only is applicable to Prince George's County. And what the bill does is it puts certain requirements on the commissioners, on one commissioner within WSSC, and that is it, Mr. Chair. And there are others here that, no.
Well, nobody else, it's sponsor only.
Okay.
Or must be. No, it's not explicitly sponsor only, but nobody else signed up to
Perfect.
testify.
And with that, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
That ends my testimony.
Well, any questions for Delegate Holmes? Seeing none, that ends the hearing on that bill. Is anybody presenting House Bill 872? Angela Alsobrooks has written, actually, nobody, hold on. Well,
We have two members from the county.
oh, I'm sorry,
executive's office.
pardon me. I wasn't seeing this page. Ron Young is representing, is that you?
I'm Patrick Gallagher. Ron Young got tested positive with COVID this morning, so
Oh.
I'm Patrick Gallagher. in his
Okay,
place.
would you like to come up and testify?
Yeah, we also have the.
Angie Rogers, Jared McCarthy, and Guy Andes is here for information, or, yeah, he's back there. So if you have any questions for the WSSC, he's the guy to talk to. But go ahead.
Yeah, this is Patrick Gallagher from the Office of the County Executive. I would just defer to our DCAO, Angie Rogers, of Economic Development, and Jared McCarthy, Government Operations, to describe the bill before us.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. It's my pleasure to testify in support of HB 872. My colleague, Deputy CAO Jared McCarthy, who is also the executive's liaison to WSSC, will offer remarks on the technical merits of the bill, but as Deputy CAO for Economic Development, I will comment on what the bill means for the economic growth of the county. In 2021, County Executive Alsobrooks announced a new economic development platform for the county. It's a dynamic agenda focused on growing jobs, housing, and amenities, and specifically in our neighborhoods inside the Beltway and around transit. The bill, as drafted, only affects one project in our economic development pipeline, but it is a pivotal one that fulfills goals across our platform for increasing jobs, increasing affordable housing. We have a goal to build 26,000 new units of housing by 2030, 75% of which would be affordable, diversifying our housing types by building multifamily housing, attracting more retail and specifically fresh food retail square footage as the project is in a healthy food priority area. The project is located at 1501 Southern Avenue in Oxon Hill, Maryland. It's on the Prince George's border with the District of Columbia. It's 15 acres, 500 feet from the Southern Avenue Metro Station. Proposes to build 985 multifamily residential units, including affordable, market rate, and senior. It has 19,000 square feet tagged for a full-service grocer, over 9,000 square feet for additional retail, and 150 student capacity childcare center. Our economic development efforts in the county are focused squarely on projects like these. We think these mixed-use projects, I'll wrap up, our best efforts to grow Prince George's as an economic engine, and we urge the committee's support. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Jared, you're up next. Maybe you can explain what the bill does.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jared McCarthy, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Prince George's County and liaison to WSSC. What this bill does and why we're in front of you is this project has been bouncing back and forth between WSSC and the county exec's office since about 2021. We were first contacted in July. The unfortunate aspect of this project is they are unable to connect in a straight line to WSSC infrastructure, primarily water. Sewage is in a closer capacity, but as many of you may know, all of the sewage in that area goes to the Blue Plains plant that's run by DC Water anyway. So it's really an issue of water. What this bill does is it takes care of a legal issue brought to our attention by WSSC's general counsel. She has opined that WSSC lacks the legal authority to enter into an intergovernmental agreement that would benefit this private developer. Now, what we would say is there are legacy projects that already connect on both the Montgomery and the Prince George's County side to DC water, and that this was an interpretation that we certainly don't necessarily agree with, but it's one for why we're here. So what this bill does is it limits the ability of this project to connect to DC water, and it really is structured in a way, and I'd refer to page 2 of the bill, where it is designed to not open the floodgates. And what I mean by that is this is not going to allow multiple projects to connect to DC water and in any way impact either the Montgomery County side of WSSC or really create an avalanche of loss of income for WSSC. As you can see, it's very specific. The criteria is certainly something that applies to only one property. Thank you very much.
Okay. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if my question is directed to the panel or to the staff here, but there were some Montgomery County amendments to this bill, and I don't know if they're incorporated. I don't know. I don't think I see them here. For example, I think there was a time limit put on the bill as a sunset. I'm sorry. Yes, and I don't see those here, and I just want to make sure that they're incorporated into the bill.
There are amendments that were recommended by both the Montgomery County and Prince George's County delegations. They're not on the bill as introduced, but they would be discussed in subcommittee. And one of those, I would note, did have a sunset period.
And I could have said like Prince George's County did support those amendments, so there was no issue on that.
Any other questions for the witnesses on this bill? Okay, that concludes, thank you very much. That concludes the public hearing on House Bill 872. Now, this really does conclude the public hearings for the afternoon. We need how much time to set up for the 5 minutes? Okay, so we'll be voting in 5 minutes. See you then.